From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. We begin in Guatemala, where the UN has urged the country's leadership to transfer the responsibilities of the International Commission Against Impunity to national institutions. President Jimmy Morales expelled the UN mission over the weekend. The decision came just after Congress announced it will discuss plans to remove Morales' immunity. The UN says the latest move is a setback into the prosecution, investigation, and dismantling of criminal networks in the country. The preliminary trial against President Morales is already underway. There are mixed opinions about the future of the UN International Commission Against Impunity.
The Guatemalan Congress announced a court date for President Jimmy Morales to present his defense in the preliminary trial against him. Members of the Supreme Electoral Court, Prosecutor's Office, and the UN's International Commission Against Impunity will also attend.
En la primera semana de octubre.
We have given a court date to President Jimmy Morales between October 11th and October 14th.
Para que el presidente de la República pueda atender.
Indigenous leaders across the country urged the Congress to start the legal process against President Morales. They say it is important for the people to know if the head of state received illegal funds during his presidential campaign in 2015.
Cuando contendió por la presidencia en el 2015.
Por lo tanto,
they should remove impunity for President Jimmy Morales to be investigated. This is the third time they want to remove his impunity. He should be in jail by now.
Se le quite la inmunidad al presidente, ya debería estar en la cárcel.
President Jimmy Morales expelled the International Commission Against Impunity after an investigation on corruption allegations against him. This generated mixed opinions in the country.
We elected the president to make these kinds of decisions. Maybe some people don't agree with him, but in my opinion, I think he did the right thing. He applied the law.
Yo en lo personal creo que lo importante es que lo hizo por la vía correcta.
We can see that the International Commission Against Impunity has done much more than Jimmy Morales. That's why we don't agree with the president. Although he has all the right to do so, we would prefer that the Commission does it.
The Constitutional Court has rejected the proposed legal protection for President Jimmy Morales.
Colombian Supreme Court has rejected another legal challenge filed by former President Álvaro Uribe. Uribe filed a challenge against the judges in charge of a fraud investigation of him, but the court believes the reasons presented by his legal team are not valid. The case against the former president began in February. The National Liberation Army in Colombia says they will release kidnapped military and police personnel. This despite not reaching an agreement with the government. The armed group is afraid that the safety of the captives could be at risk as more time passes. The ELN has also asked international organizations and the church to support the operation. The government has thus far been reluctant to resume negotiations with the ELN.
We are aware that the government will not facilitate an agreement for the release of the kidnapped. Time goes by and the risk of tragedy increases for the life and well-being of those captives. The government has opposed to third parties participating and guaranteeing the safety of the operation. For this reason, a release that could have been done 3 weeks ago hasn't happened yet.
And staying in Colombia, another social leader has been killed in north of the country. The victim was the president of the Community Action Board in the municipality of Tarazá. According to eyewitnesses' reports, a group of hooded men shot the victim dead near his home. Social organizations have condemned the attack. They are demanding that the government protect social leaders. And Mexico, too, has seen another murder mayor. The elected mayor of Napalucan, Felix Aguilar Caballero, was killed during an ambush on Monday. Member of the Ecologist Green Party of Mexico, the mayor allegedly had criminal ties, authorities stated. Over the last 12 years, a total of 139 mayors have been murdered across Mexico, according to the National Association of Mayors working in the country. And Argentinian Finance Minister Nicolás Dujovne has met the head of the International Monetary Fund in Washington. He's trying to get the IMF to agree to a deal urgently to give the country further economic support. Critics say the government is just pushing the country to more debt. Now, new deal has yet been announced.
This is meant to improve and strengthen the agreements we started in July with IMF. Argentina has already advanced in this with the fiscal measures that we announced. We're talking with IMF about how to continue with this so it can improve the economic indicators in Argentina.
And thousands have marched in Argentina against the austerity measures announced by President Mauricio Macri. They are angry about the adjustment policies, saying they will increase suffering. On Monday, Macri announced up to 11 ministries will be removed and a new tax on exports will be enforced.
Halving ministries implies a really dire situation for the public administration and state. They're reducing the state. They're shrinking it. The state is losing its power to regulate.
A huge indignation, an overact, rehearsed speech that doesn't take care of the disaster they have done because they impoverish us and they send the money abroad.
And our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more details.
A day after President Mauricio Macri imposed new economic measures in an attempt to slow down the crisis, the dollar continues its steady rise over the peso, and the stock exchange continues to drop. Inflation is well on its way to reaching 46%, as was forecast by the government itself. At the start of the year, inflation was forecast at just 10%, but that number has clearly skyrocketed, highlighting the failure of the Macri administration. Today, also the rise of fuel prices by 12%, which could eventually lead to rising prices for basic food items and cost of living expenses. Yet wages remain stagnant. Looting has started in some cities, in particular in Chaco, where a 13-year-old child was shot dead by security forces.
Thank you, Edgardo, for your report. And now let's get more details on the currency crisis in Argentina in this report.
After a series of economic adjustments, Argentine President Mauricio Macri addressed the nation. However, people were expecting more than just a speech. They were expecting him to change his policies.
This can't all change in an instant. It's a gradual process. We had to change many things that were not favorable for everyone, but were necessary. What we did was to ask the world for some help.
After his short presidential address, Macri explained why he decided to close down 10 ministries. He also confirmed he would raise tariffs on soy and other grains. After his measures were announced, the Minister of Economy, Nicolás Dujovne, gave a speech as well.
We
must admit that we made some mistakes. Argentina's weak position forced us into this situation. Our intention is to bring solution to all the challenges we are facing. At the same time, we must take care of the most vulnerable section of the society. Reduce the taxes and the fiscal deficit. We didn't take enough care of the fiscal issues before, and that has greatly affected Argentina in comparison to those countries who have balanced fiscal record.
Dujovne promised a balanced budget after a high fiscal deficit this year. Public education funding was badly affected following corruption allegations against some government officials.
In 2019, instead of aiming for the original goal of 1.3% of deficit, we will work for fiscal balance and not in the payment of interests. This means that we will save $6 billion that we won't need to return to the international market. In 2020, we will have more than fiscal balance. We will have a surplus of 1%, which will save us another $5.2 billion.
With these weak measures taken by the government, experts say the officials want to dollarize the economy. Experts also fear the way it can affect the country.
For that to happen, by our calculations, the dollar would have to cost 85 pesos. At that level, our domestic market will be ruined. It would lead to the collapse of Argentinian society. It's not viable.
While these changes by the government are meant to stabilize the fluctuating market, the peso remains historically low. The Ministry of Economy, Dujovne, will be traveling to Washington to renegotiate the loan agreement with the IMF.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on FtS. Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on FtS.
Welcome back. The Venezuelan government has responded to the meeting held by a dozen Latin American countries in Quito, Ecuador, to discuss Venezuelan migrants. In a tweet, the government said that President Nicolás Maduro has asked his foreign minister to formally protest against the summit. The statement also says the meeting only promotes xenophobia against Venezuelans abroad. Brazil's Workers' Party has announced it will present an appeal to the Supreme Federal Court. It wants to guarantee the presidential candidacy of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. The PT will also appeal to the United Nations. Its Human Rights Committee had said Lula's political rights needs to be respected. Vice presidential candidate Fernando Haddad says the party will continue appealing to all instances in order to secure his candidacy. However, the PT is banned from using Lula's images in any of its campaigns. People are calling on Brazil's Supreme Court to prosecute presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro for electoral insult, incitement to crime, and threatening language. Over the weekend, the far-right candidate gave a speech and, while holding a gun, said that members of the opposition Workers' Party should be shot. He already has charges against him for racism and a rape apology.
We will shoot down members of the Workers' Party in Acre. We will make them flee, and since they like Venezuela so much, they'll have to go there and they will eat grass, because they don't even have mortadella.
A Quechua Indian is Bolivia's new foreign minister. Diego Pari was sworn in on Tuesday. He is of indigenous descent and belongs to the Quechua community. He previously worked as Bolivia's ambassador to the OAS. Pari replaces Fernando Guanacuni. The outgoing minister is a member of the Aymara ethnic group. And the presidents of Peru and Bolivia have finished their fourth bilateral summit. They discussed the construction of the bioceanic train and regional development.
Bilateral cabinet summits between Bolivia and Peru started in 2015. So far, there's been an 80% completion rate on agreements to date.
It's important to record our efforts to clean up Lake Titicaca. Contaminated water from both countries flows into that lake. So we have both compromised to fix the issue in the short term.
The summit was held in the city of Cobija, near the border with Peru. Agreements on border security, fighting drug trafficking, as well as other issues were made. Another topic that was up for discussion was continuing the construction of the bioceanic train.
This train will be part of intercontinental trade. The port of Ilo will be a strategic point for imports and exports. Billions of products will go through there.
This train plans to join the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific, covering nearly 4,000 kilometers. It has an investment of $14 billion.
All of South America will see the benefit. I have said before, this is the biggest physical integration project of the 21st century.
On a 42-point declaration, both governments announced they will push for the future of the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, so it may once again work for integration. The fifth bilateral summit will be held in Peru in 2019.
And congressmen from different political parties in Peru have called for Attorney General Pedro Chavarri to resign. Along with other authorities, he has been accused of corruption and allegedly having links to a criminal organization. Through an official statement, Chavarri said he would not resign since there is no evidence or legal basis to these accusations. And unions in Trinidad and Tobago are gearing up for a national strike this Friday. But the government is threatening legal action if certain essential service workers walk off their job. The Minister of Public Administration warned that the armed forces, healthcare workers, and teachers could face a fine or even imprisonment. The unions have vowed to ramp up their actions if the government follows through on their threats.
We stand firmly in solidarity with all the teachers and the problems they have. And if you want to exacerbate the problems that you have already created, just touch one of these trade unions in Trinidad and Tobago.
A mass poisoning has affected more than 300 children in the coastal area of Chile. Relatives of the victims are asking the government for help.
Residents in the communities of Puchincaví and Quinteros have used social media to tell the world their children were victims of mass poisoning. They denounced it before this became news.
We were in class and suddenly all of us began fainting. There was an unbearable smell.
Since then, 2 weeks have passed. There are more than 300 children affected. A toxic cloud coming from an industrial camp dating back to the 60s is believed to be responsible for the events. The Regional Service of Health has identified methylchloroform in the air. The use of this substance has been forbidden in the country since 2015 because it affects the blood system and cardiorespiratory and central nervous system.
She felt weak. She had a lot of headaches. She also felt fatigue in her legs. We immediately decided to take her to the hospital. When the doctors began to examine her, they discovered she lost its sensibility in her legs.
Despite the government order the children to be examined, the Minister of Health has dismissed the consequences of the poisoning.
I wanted to contradict the Minister of Health. I want to say that children didn't have a normal reaction to the toxic cloud. The victims suffered from nausea and paralysis.
Local media eventually reported on what happened. The Minister of Health retracted from its statement and President Sebastián Piñera announced an intervention plan in the area.
We'll be back very soon. Stay right here.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Palestinians have protested against the United States' decision to stop aid funding for Palestinian refugees. The protesters burned photos of President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outside the U.S. consulate in Ramallah. Last week, the U.S. announced to cut $300 million fund for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. The aid was crucial for providing education and health care to more than 5 million Palestinians.
We are here to raise our voice and reject the American actions and decisions. We remain committed to our right and to return to our land and our self-determination. The United States, when they decided to stop funding the UN RWA, they are calling for an open war and attack the aid agency and the right of return for the refugees. We're not going to compromise with our rights.
And almost 90 elephants have been killed in Botswana, according to an animal charity. Elephants Without Borders claims they counted about 87 carcasses with their tusks chopped off in their aerial survey. The elephants are believed to have been poached in the Okavango Delta Wildlife Sanctuary over the last few months. Earlier this year, under a new government policy, a special force of forest rangers were disarmed. And Spain's new socialist government wants to bring back the principle of international jurisdiction, and that's the right of Spanish courts to try crimes not committed in Spain or even which do not involve Spanish citizens. The government has set up a commission to fulfill its campaign promise.
The murder of a Spanish cameraman allegedly by U.S. soldiers during the Iraq War in 2003. The historic extradition request made against the former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet. Or the alleged human rights violations against prisoners in Guantanamo. These are just a few of the most famous cases in which the Spanish justice system was involved, thanks to international jurisdiction. This ended with a reform in 2014. The reform was passed by the Popular Party, which then enjoyed an absolute majority in parliament, and it brought those investigations to a halt. Now, the new socialist government wants to bring it back.
Far from being a neo-colonial tool, as many people say, it is a horizontal tool which makes countries equal when it comes to fighting impunity in the most serious crimes against the people.
That's why the government created a commission of experts to work on reopening those cases. International law applies to crimes regardless of where they took place, or the nationality of the victims or the culprits. It applies mostly to cases of drug trafficking, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and torture. The Commission's members defend their work.
There was a time when Spain was a pioneer and point of reference in this. International jurisdiction makes it possible to pursue such investigations and to punish severe crimes against humanity, which are everyone's responsibility, because they affect everyone.
The Popular Party agrees with the need for international jurisdiction in some cases, despite abolishing it in 2014. Today they say that they didn't do that, but just proposed reforming it. But they say that the government's proposal for restoring it is unrealistic, because it goes beyond the powers of any one state.
The Popular Party wants to improve it, but they should be realistic, because to say that any person in the world can be judged for any crime by such and such a judge in Madrid, that would be lying to people.
However, the Baltasar Garzón Foundation, one of the most important advocates of international jurisdiction, says that the Popular Party did eliminate this principle. It did so after pressure from the Chinese government over a Spanish investigation into genocide in Tibet. 4 years later, if everything goes as planned, Spain may bring it back.
A graffiti art festival featuring artist Diego Velázquez paintings has been livening up town in Galicia, Spain. Every year since 2008, artists take over the declining neighborhood of Canido in Ferrol to spend 3 days painting their version of Velázquez's famous painting. Las Meninas, according to locals, the festival has attracted more and more visitors, and the population of Ferrol has doubled. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.